Rachel Morgan woke before dawn, not from any alarm, but from the military clock still ticking in her bones. 12 years in the Army Search and Rescue Division had permanently altered her circadian rhythm, even 3 years after discharge. Beyond her bedroom window, the Colorado mountains were still dark silhouettes against the Navy sky. She'd moved to Cedar Falls 8 years ago, seeking peace in these mountains, running from ghosts of Afghanistan that still visited in nightmares. Morning light wouldn't reach her small cabin for another hour. Rachel stretched, feeling the familiar pain in her left shoulder, shrapnel from a rescue mission gone wrong. The physical therapist called it remarkable progress. The VA called it 30% disability. Rachel just called it Tuesday. From the living room came the familiar sound of Duke's nails on hardwood, the German Shepherd's morning patrol. He'd been her partner in Afghanistan, trained for search and rescue operations. When her tour ended, she'd pulled strings to bring him home. Now Duke's military instincts had softened into domestic vigilance, checking windows, doors, and most importantly, the door to 10-year-old Jason's room. Coffee first, then wake Jason for school. The ritual of measuring beans, the grinder's loud whir in the silent house, these simple actions anchored her days. Through the kitchen window, she could see her pickup truck, the one luxury she'd allowed herself, now essential for her wilderness guiding business. Work had been scarce lately. 3 canceled bookings this month meant the mortgage payment would be tight again. Divorce hadn't just broken her heart, it had broken their financial stability. David had walked away 3 years ago, leaving her with a mountain of debt, a traumatized 7-year-old, and monthly child support payments that arrived sporadically at best. She'd rebuilt from scratch, creating a life for Jason centered on the healing power of these mountains. Steam rose from her coffee mug as she leaned against the counter, mentally calculating bills against the upcoming guided tours, the elementary school tuition, the cabin mortgage, the truck payment. Like navigating a minefield, one misstep could blow everything apart. The medical bills from Jason's asthma attack last winter still haunted her credit score. Duke's ears perked up seconds before the small figure appeared in the hallway. Jason stood there in dinosaur pajamas, hair disheveled, eyes still heavy with sleep. "It's still dark out. Why are you up so early?" Rachel set her coffee down and crossed the kitchen. "Just soldier habits. But why are you awake, mountain man?" Another bad dream. Jason shook his head, glancing toward the windows. "Duke says something's out there." Rachel felt her spine straighten. The German Shepherd's threat assessment skills had saved lives in Afghanistan. If Duke sensed something, she moved to the window, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved in the pre-dawn darkness. Probably just deer. "Your backpack's ready by the door. Want some breakfast?" The morning routine unfolded: oatmeal with maple syrup and blueberries. Jason's inhaler checked lunch, packed with a note tucked inside. Rachel watched her son eat this miracle who'd somehow survived his parents' nuclear meltdown, with his gentle spirit intact. He had David's dark eyes, but Rachel's determined chin. And somewhere deep inside, an old soul's wisdom that sometimes left her speechless. "Gonna wear your blue jacket today. Weather report says rain this afternoon." Jason had nodded, spooning the last of his oatmeal. "Can we go explore this weekend? You promised we could look for arrowheads by the creek." Rachel felt the familiar pang of guilt. Her weekend guiding tour had been canceled, which meant lost income but gained time. The bills whispered in her ear, but Jason's hopeful expression won. "Absolutely. Just you, me, and Duke. Full wilderness adventure." She dropped Jason at Cedar Falls Elementary, watched him walk inside with his too heavy backpack, then headed to Frank's Hardware. Frank Henley had been ordering special gear for her clients since she'd started her business. More importantly, he kept an ear to the ground about potential customers. Frank's weathered face brightened when she entered. "Rachel, just the mountain woman I needed to see. Got a couple from Chicago looking for someone to show them the high country next week. Told them you're the best guide in 3 counties. The familiar routine of business discussion, coffee refills, and local gossip followed. Cedar Falls operated on relationships, not contracts. Rachel had spent years carefully building her reputation, balancing her need for privacy with the necessity of community connection. Frank's expression shifted, voice lowering. "Heard anything about the old Miller property changing hands? Some corporate types were asking questions at the county records office yesterday." Rachel shook her head. That land had been vacant for decades, 1,000 pristine acres bordering national forest. Development would mean more tourists, but also more restrictions on her access to wilderness routes. Her phone buzzed Eleanor, her elderly neighbor who watched Jason after school. A canceled doctor's appointment meant Eleanor could take Jason today after all. One small worry lifted from Rachel's shoulders. With her afternoons suddenly free and no clients scheduled, Rachel decided to map a new trail route for future tours. She loaded Duke into the pickup truck and headed toward the eastern ridge where autumn had painted the aspen trees brilliant gold against the evergreens. These solo explorations with Duke were sacred moments when the wilderness healed what the human world had broken. The familiar weight of her backpack, the rhythm of hiking boots on mountain soil, Duke moving ahead with purpose, this was meditation in motion. 3 miles in, Rachel paused to check her topographic map. The ridge trail should connect with Blackwater Creek about a mile ahead, creating a loop back to her truck. Duke stopped suddenly, his posture transformed, ears forward, body tensed like a coiled spring. Rachel recognized the alert posture instantly. It was the same stance he'd taken when finding survivors in collapsed buildings. But here in the peaceful Colorado wilderness, it made no sense. "What is it, boy?" The German shepherd stared intently through a gap in the trees, then looked back at Rachel. A clear communication. "Follow me." Rachel checked her sidearm, a habit from Afghanistan she'd never abandoned, and moved cautiously behind Duke. They veered off the established trail, moving through a dense stand of pines. Rachel noted landmarks for the return journey, mentally mapping this unexplored territory. The terrain sloped downward into a small, hidden valley she'd never noticed before. Duke moved with increasing urgency, his training overpowering his usual trail discipline. The forest opened into a small clearing, and Rachel froze, unable to process what she saw. A passenger train car sat among the trees, its metal sides dark with rust and age vines claiming much of the visible surface. It rested on the forest floor, as if it had simply rolled to a stop among the pines in a place where no train tracks existed. Rachel's mind rejected the image. She'd been exploring these mountains for 8 years, had memorized every trail, every landmark. It was impossible for something this size to exist without her knowledge. Yet there it stood, solid and undeniable. Duke whined softly, uncertainty a request for guidance. Rachel approached cautiously, training kicking in. She scanned for signs of recent human presence, finding none. The vegetation around the train cars suggested it had been there for years, possibly decades. Impossible. There's never been a rail line through this valley. The exterior showed extensive weathering, but inconsistently. Some sections appeared decades old, while others showed patterns suggesting more recent exposure. Someone had worked to make this look abandoned longer than it actually had been. Rachel circled the cars slowly, noting details with the systematic approach her military training had instilled. The wheels weren't just sitting on the ground, they were partially buried soil and organic matter accumulated around them. The ivy covering the sides was mature but not ancient, suggesting perhaps 15 years of growth. Duke's low growl drew her attention to the rear of the car, where a door stood slightly ajar. The opening was narrow, maybe 6 inches, revealing only darkness within. Rachel pulled a small flashlight from her pack and approached cautiously. The metal hinges showed signs of recent use, no rust buildup. Faint oil stains where someone had kept the mechanism functional. This wasn't an abandoned relic. It was being maintained, visited, used for some purpose that required access. The door opened with minimal resistance, confirming her suspicion about the hinges. Inward, her flashlight beam revealed a passenger compartment that should have been furnished with rows of seats. Instead, the space had been gutted and modified. Steel rings were bolted to the floor and walls at regular intervals. Scratch marks scarred wooden surfaces, and dark stains that might have been blood had soaked into the planking. Rachel's throat tightened. This wasn't a forgotten train car. This was a prison. Duke refused to enter, backing away from the door with another growl that raised the hair on Rachel's arms. His reaction confirmed her instincts. This place had witnessed violence and suffering. The conductor's station at the front remained more intact, probably to maintain the illusion of a normal passenger car for anyone glimpsing it from a distance. Rachel approached carefully, noting the floor here showed different wear patterns, heavier traffic, recent use. Tucked behind the conductor's station desk, wedged into the narrow space between the desk and wall, she found a pocket watch. Tarnished silver with an engraved cover. Working it free, her flashlight revealed an inscription: "To Thomas Wilson, 25 years of faithful service. Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, 1987. Not ancient history. This watch belonged to someone from 1987, which meant this train car had been in use just 38 years ago. Recent enough that there should be records missing, person reports, some acknowledgement of what had happened here. In a compartment that once held emergency equipment, she found water-damaged pages from what appeared to be a passenger manifest. The papers were partially illegible, but she could make out fragments of names and destinations. None of the destinations were local. These passengers had been traveling long distances from Denver to locations across the western United States. The manifest pages were dated September 15th, 1987, and listed 12 passengers plus a crew of 3. 15 people who had apparently boarded a train in Denver, and according to this evidence, never reached their intended destinations. Duke's sudden alert bark sent adrenaline coursing through Rachel's system. She secured the watch and manifest pages in her pack and moved quickly to the door. The dog was staring toward the tree-lined body, rigid with attention. Then she heard it too, the distant sound of an engine growing closer. Someone driving up what must be an old logging road that passed within a quarter-mile of this location. Someone potentially coming to check on their hidden secret. Rachel's training activated automatically. She photographed the interior, quickly documenting the steel ring stains and modifications. Then she closed the door carefully, making sure it was positioned exactly as she'd found it, and moved away with Duke at her heels. They took cover behind a fallen log, about 40 yards from the clearing, close enough to observe, but far enough to avoid detection. The engine sound grew louder, then stopped. Car doors slammed, voices murmured, footsteps crunched on forest floor. Through gaps in the vegetation, she watched 2 men emerge into the clearing. Both wore civilian clothes, but moved with the coordinated precision of people accustomed to working together in potentially dangerous situations. One carried a large duffel bag, the other had what looked like cleaning supplies. They approached the train car with obvious familiarity. When the first man opened the door, he did it with the easy confidence of someone who had performed this action many times before. They entered and remained inside for nearly 20 minutes. When they emerged, the man with the duffel bag was carrying something wrapped in plastic. They loaded it into their vehicle, a dark SUV with tinted windows and no visible license plates, and drove away without looking back. Rachel remained hidden for another 15 minutes before approaching the train car again. The men had been careful, but they'd left signs of their presence, tire tracks and soft earth footprints around the car, and inside the smell of industrial cleaning products that couldn't completely mask the odor of fresh blood. Whatever this place was being used for, it was still active. The train car wasn't a historical crime scene. It was an ongoing operation. Rachel photographed the tire treads and took GPS coordinates before heading back toward the truck, mind racing. 15 people had disappeared in 1987, and others might be suffering or dying in this hidden prison even now. But who could she trust with this information? Duke stayed unusually close on the return journey, his training keeping him alert for any sign of the men returning. The afternoon sun filtered through golden aspen leaves, creating dappled patterns that hours ago would have seemed beautiful. Now they only cast suspicious shadows. Back at her truck, Rachel checked her watch. Still time to pick up Jason from school herself instead of having him wait for Eleanor. The normality of the school parking lot felt surreal after what she discovered. Children streamed from the building, parents called out greetings, teachers waved from doorways. Jason emerged, spotting her truck immediately. His face lit up. An unexpected pickup meant something special. He climbed in immediately, reaching to ruffle Duke's fur. "You're early. Did somebody cancel again?" Rachel forced a smile, compartmentalizing her discovery. For the next few hours, she would be just a mom, not a woman who had found evidence of multiple murders. "Thought we'd get ice cream before heading home." How was school? The drive to Millie's ice cream parlor gave Jason time to recount his day, the science project on ecosystems, the trouble with math homework, the playground politics. Rachel listened, asking questions, storing away each detail of her son's life, while another part of her mind processed the train car's implications. At home, she helped Jason with homework while preparing dinner. The ordinary routine, a strange counterpoint to the evidence hidden in her backpack. After Jason was asleep, she spread the water-damage manifest pages on her kitchen table and studied them under bright light. The passenger list remained partially illegible, but what she could read raised more questions. The names appeared to be from diverse ethnic backgrounds: Wilson Rodriguez, Washington, O'Brien Kowalski. The destinations scattered across multiple states: Seattle, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, Portland. This hadn't been a regular passenger route. No single train would have served all those destinations in 1987, which meant these people had been traveling on some kind of special transport. Witness protection, perhaps, or a prisoner transfer. But the manifest was printed on civilian railroad letterhead, not government forms. Rachel photographed the pages with her phone, then secured the originals in a waterproof bag. The conductor's watch went into the same bag wrapped in soft cloth to prevent further damage. Her laptop connected to satellite internet became her research tool. She searched for missing person reports from 1987 focusing on Colorado and surrounding states for any reference to the names she could read from the manifest. Hours of searching yielded nothing. Not one of the 12 passengers appeared in any missing person report she could find. That absence was almost more troubling than finding evidence of their deaths. 15 people don't simply vanish without anyone noticing unless their disappearance had been orchestrated by people with the power to suppress investigations. Rachel's next search focused on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and any special operations they might have conducted in the '87. The railroad had been absorbed by larger companies over the years, but archived records suggested they had occasionally contracted with federal agencies for secure transport of sensitive cargo and personnel. The pieces began assembling into a disturbing picture. Federal agencies suppressed missing person reports, a train car modified for imprisonment and still being used for something that required regular cleaning and maintenance. This went far beyond local crime. This involved people with significant resources and likely governmental connections. When her phone rang late that evening, the sudden sound made both her and Duke jump. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Miss Morgan, this is Deputy Sheriff Carl Morrison from Lamar County. I understand you do wilderness guiding in the area. Rachel's pulse quickened. That's right. How can I help you? We've had reports of someone camping illegally in the national forest, possibly squatting in an old structure. I was wondering if you'd encountered anything unusual during your recent trips into the backcountry. The question was too specific, too perfectly timed to be coincidental. Someone knew she'd been near the train car and was testing to see what she might report. I haven't seen any illegal camping. What kind of structure are you referring to? Old mining equipment, abandoned railroad cars, that sort of thing. The kind of place someone might set up camp thinking they wouldn't be disturbed. There it was, confirmation that law enforcement, or at least someone posing as law enforcement, was aware of the train car's location and monitoring who might discover it. I'll keep an eye out. If I see anything that looks like illegal camping, I'll give you a call. I'd appreciate that. And Miss Morgan, if you do come across anything unusual, it would be best to report it immediately rather than investigating on your own. Some of these squatters can be dangerous, especially if they're involved in drug manufacturing or other illegal activities. The warning was clear enough. Stay away. Don't investigate. Don't cause problems by asking questions. After hanging up, Rachel sat staring at the manifest pages. The call confirmed she was already on someone's radar. The men she'd observed had probably reported seeing fresh footprints or other signs of an unauthorized visitor. Duke patted over and rested his chin on her knee, sensing her tension. She scratched behind his ears, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. In Afghanistan, she'd learned to trust his instincts about danger. His unease at the train car had been unmistakable, and his continued alertness suggested the threat hadn't passed. Her military contacts might provide insight, but reaching out would create a paper trail that could draw unwanted attention. Still, the magnitude of what she'd discovered potential federal involvement, the ongoing operation using the train car, demanded expertise beyond her own capabilities. Rachel made two decisions before sunset. First, she would return to the train car for a more thorough investigation, but prepared for encountering the people using it. Second, she would contact Colonel James Harrison, her former commanding officer, who had the security clearance and connections to provide guidance without creating unnecessary exposure. Colonel Harrison had been her commanding officer during her final 2 years in Afghanistan and had recommended her for specialized search and rescue training. More importantly, he'd helped her navigate the difficult transition to civilian life when her service ended. If anyone could provide insight into operations involving hidden transportation and missing persons, it would be Colonel Harrison. She composed a carefully worded email describing her discovery in terms that would be clear to someone with military intelligence experience, but vague enough to avoid triggering automated surveillance systems. She mentioned finding evidence of a historical transportation incident with federal implications and requested a secure phone conversation. The response came within an hour, suggesting Colonel Harrison was taking her inquiry seriously. The message contained only a phone number and a time call at 0800 tomorrow. Use encryption. That night, Rachel slept fitfully, waking several times to check locks on doors and windows. Duke spent the night on the floor beside her bed, instead of in his usual spot by the fireplace. Twice she heard him growl softly at sounds outside that her own ears couldn't detect. The peaceful isolation she'd cultivated for years had been shattered in a single morning, replaced by the kind of vigilance she'd thought she'd left behind in Afghanistan. But along with the tension came a familiar sense of purpose, the knowledge that she was involved in something that mattered, something that could make a difference in other people's lives. The encrypted call with Colonel Harrison began at precisely 0800 the next morning. Morgan, I need you to be very careful about what you found. Can you give me exact coordinates? She provided the GPS location and heard him typing in the background. Jesus Christ. That location was flagged in our system as recently as 6 months ago. There's an active federal investigation, but it's compartmentalized way above my clearance level. Active investigation into what I can't get details, but the file references missing federal witnesses from the 1980s and potential ongoing operations. Morgan, this isn't some cold case you stumbled into. This is live, current, and dangerous. Colonel Harrison's warning only strengthened Rachel's resolve. Sir, I found evidence that 15 people disappeared in 1987. And yesterday I witnessed 2 men cleaning what looked like fresh blood from inside that train car. Whatever happened in the past, it's still happening now. The silence stretched long enough that Rachel wondered that if the connection had been lost. Finally, Colonel Harrison spoke again, his voice careful and measured. I'm going to give you a contact. Someone who's been working this case longer than anyone should have to work any case. But Morgan, once you make this call, you're committed. There's no going back to your quiet mountain life. I understand, sir. Her name is Agent Samantha Reynolds, FBI. She's been investigating witness protection failures for nearly 4 decades. If anyone can tell you what you're dealing with, it's her. But Rachel, his use of her first name caught her attention. She's been burned by this case more than once. People she trusted sold her out. Witnesses she was protecting died. Investigations she built were shut down from above. She doesn't trust easily, and she has good reason. Colonel Harrison provided a secure phone number and specific protocols for contacting Agent Reynolds. After ending the call, Rachel sat drinking coffee and staring out at the peaceful mountain landscape that no longer felt like sanctuary. Duke's sudden bark drew her attention to the window facing the road. A vehicle was approaching, not the familiar engine sound of neighbors, but something larger, heavier. Through the trees, she caught glimpses of a dark SUV similar to the one she'd seen at the train car. Rachel's military training activated. She grabbed her go-bag, secured the manifest pages and conductor's watch, and moved to a position where she could observe without being seen. Duke positioned himself at her side, alert, but silent. The SUV stopped at the end of her driveway, far enough away that she couldn't read the license plate clearly. 2 men got out, different from those she'd seen at the train car, but with the same purposeful bearing. One remained by the vehicle while the other walked up her driveway, not toward the house, but toward where she parked her truck. She watched through binoculars as he examined her truck, paying particular attention to the tires and undercarriage. He was looking for evidence that she'd driven on logging roads near the train car, checking for specific mud or vegetation that would confirm her presence at the location. After 10 minutes of examination, the man returned to the SUV. They sat there for another quarter hour, observing her cabin before driving away. The message was clear. They knew who she was, where she lived, and they were watching to see what she would do next. Rachel waited 2 hours, ensuring they weren't circling back to resume surveillance before preparing for school pickup. She needed to appear normal while processing the implications of being targeted. Jason would need protection, which meant involving Eleanor more directly. The elderly woman had been Rachel's neighbor and occasional babysitter for years. A retired military nurse with no family of her own, Eleanor had adopted Rachel and Jason as surrogate family, offering childcare and a grandmother's love. More importantly, Eleanor had seen enough of the world to recognize danger and had the steady hands needed in a crisis. Rachel picked Jason up from school, watching carefully for any sign of surveillance. On the drive home, she kept the conversation light, but her mind was calculating risks, mapping contingencies, identifying safe houses if they needed to disappear quickly. At home, while Jason started homework at the kitchen table, Rachel called Eleanor. The carefully coded message requesting Eleanor's special applesauce recipe and mentioning it might be needed for several days activated their prearranged signal. Eleanor had been military long enough to recognize a security situation and responded immediately, agreeing to come over for dinner and bring her recipe box. Rachel helped Jason with math problems, the ordinary act of motherhood now layered with heightened vigilance. Duke patrolled the perimeter of the house, returning periodically to check on Jason, his training reactivated by the morning's threat. Eleanor arrived at precisely 6:00 p.m., a covered dish in one hand and her ancient leather recipe box in the other. Jason greeted her with a hug while Rachel secured the deadbolt behind her. Their eyes met over Jason's head, a silent confirmation passing between them. Eleanor understood the gravity of the situation without needing details. Dinner passed with forced normalcy. Eleanor's chicken casserole, fresh bread, Jason's stories about school. After Jason went to prepare for his bath, the two women spoke in low voices at the kitchen table. Military or criminal? Eleanor asked, cutting directly to the assessment that mattered. Both, I think. Something involving federal witnesses. I found something I shouldn't have, and now they're watching the house. Eleanor nodded, accepting the partial explanation. You need me to take Jason somewhere? Not yet, but I need to follow up on a lead tomorrow. Can you stay here while I'm gone? If anything happens, if they come while I'm out, take you into the cabin at Blackwater Creek. You remember how to get there. Eleanor's expression hardened with determination. I may be old, but I still remember how to evade pursuit. Jason will be safe with me. You have my word. The older woman's quiet competence eased some of Rachel's immediate worry. Eleanor had served as a frontline nurse in multiple conflicts. She knew how to function under threat, how to keep her head when others were losing theirs. Most importantly, she would protect Jason with her life if necessary. With Jason settled for the night and Eleanor installed in the guest room, Rachel prepared for her contact with Agent Reynolds the next morning. She cleaned her sidearm, checked the secure phone Colonel Harrison had specified, and reviewed the photographs and notes from the train car. Sleep came in fitful bursts, her mind processing threats and countermeasures. Dreams of Afghanistan melded with images of the train car, the steel rings on the floor, becoming restraints on wounded soldiers, the dark stains spreading across desert sand. She woke at 0500 alert despite the broken sleep. The house was quiet except for Duke's soft breathing and the distant sound of Eleanor moving in the kitchen. Rachel dressed in hiking clothes, practical for the wilderness, but also suitable for quick movement if needed. The call to Agent Reynolds was scheduled for 0700. Rachel set up in her small home office, doors closed for privacy, Duke standing guard. The specialized encryption app on her phone showed a secure connection established precisely on schedule. Miss Morgan. Agent Reynolds' voice was crisp, professional, but carried an undertone of exhaustion that spoke of decades of frustration. Colonel Harrison briefed me on your situation. I need to know exactly what you found at those coordinates. Rachel described the train car, the hidden compartment, the personal effects, and the communication device. When she mentioned the military radio, Agent Reynolds' sharp intake of breath was audible across the encrypted connection. That communication device, is it still functional? Are you receiving traffic? Yes, ma'am. I've intercepted several brief exchanges about deliveries and cleanup operations. Miss Morgan, what you found is evidence of Operation Haven, a witness protection transport program that officially never existed. In 1987, 15 federal witnesses were being moved to secure locations when their train disappeared between Denver and Salt Lake City. The official report claimed mechanical failure and a derailment in a remote canyon, but no wreckage was ever found. Agent Reynolds' explanation provided context for the manifest pages Rachel had discovered, but it also raised new questions about the scope of the conspiracy. The witnesses were testifying against a corruption network that reached into federal law enforcement, state government, and organized crime. Their testimony would have brought down dozens of officials and led to hundreds of prosecutions. Instead, they vanished, the cases collapsed, and the corrupt network survived. But you said the operation officially never existed. How could witnesses disappear from a program that wasn't real? Because Operation Haven was a black operation funded through classified channels and run by people who reported to no one. When those witnesses became inconvenient, they were eliminated. Rachel processed this information, connecting it with what she'd observed. But here's what makes this case personal for me, Miss Morgan. I was supposed to be on that train. The revelation hit Rachel like a physical blow. You were one of the witnesses. I was an undercover federal agent who had infiltrated the corruption network. My testimony was going to be the keystone that brought down the entire operation. At the last minute, my handler pulled me off the transport, said there were security concerns. I thought I was being protected. Instead, I was being saved so I could spend the next 37 years watching guilty people walk free. Agent Reynolds' voice carried a weight of survivor's guilt that Rachel recognized from her own military experience. I've been investigating this case unofficially ever since, trying to find evidence that would reopen the prosecutions. What you've discovered, the train car, the communication device, the evidence that the operation is still active, this could finally be enough. What do you mean still active? The corruption network didn't just survive the 1987 cover-up. It evolved. They've been using that train car as a disposal site for anyone who threatens to expose them. Federal witnesses, investigative journalists, whistleblowers, anyone who gets too close to the truth disappears, and their personal effects end up in that hidden compartment. The scope of what Rachel had uncovered was staggering. 37 years of murder and cover-up protected by people in positions of power who had the resources to make investigations disappear. Agent Reynolds, the communication device, intercepted messages about a delivery scheduled for November 15th. Someone else is going to die if we don't stop this. I know. I've been tracking their patterns for decades, and November 15th fits their timeline. But Miss Morgan, you need to understand what you're up against. These people have killed federal agents, judges, prosecutors, anyone who threatens them. They have resources, connections, and no moral boundaries. Then why haven't you stopped them? The silence stretched long enough that Rachel wondered if she'd crossed a line with the question. When Agent Reynolds spoke again, her voice was quieter, more personal. Because every time I've gotten close, people I trusted sold me out. Evidence disappeared from secure facilities. Witnesses died in accidents. Investigations were shut down by people whose names I never learned. After 37 years, I've realized that the corruption goes deeper than anyone imagined. But you're still trying. Because Patricia Martinez was my partner, and she died on that train. Because Thomas Wilson left behind a wife and 2 children who never learned what happened to him. Because 15 good people trusted the system to protect them, and the system murdered them instead. Rachel understood. This wasn't just about justice. It was about honor, about keeping faith with the dead, about ensuring their sacrifice had meaning. What do you need from me? I need you to keep that communication device active and monitor their traffic. I need detailed photos of everything in that hidden compartment. And I need you to stay alive long enough for us to gather enough evidence to blow this wide open. They know about me. They've been watching my cabin, following me. How long before they decide I'm too dangerous to leave alone? Not long, but you have advantages they don't expect. You know those mountains better than they do. You have military training they probably don't know about. And you have evidence they don't know you've found. What about backup? Can you bring in other agents? I don't know who to trust within the Bureau. 37 years of watching investigations get sabotaged has made me very careful about who I share information with. For now, it's just you and me. The isolation of their position was both terrifying and clarifying. Rachel had spent 8 years building a life defined by solitude, but this was different. This was the isolation of people fighting powerful enemies without institutional support. There's something else, Agent Reynolds said. I've been in contact with Sarah Wilson, Thomas Wilson's daughter. She's been searching for answers about her father's disappearance since she was 12 years old. She deserves to know what happened to him. Is it safe to involve her? Probably not, but she's been investigating this on her own for years, and she's already at risk. She might be safer working with us than trying to find answers on her own. The communication device in Rachel's pack crackled with incoming traffic, interrupting their conversation. She activated the speaker so Agent Reynolds could hear the exchange. Phoenix to control, target acquired surveillance data. Recommend immediate action. Control to Phoenix. Authorization granted. Clean protocols understood. Initiating tonight. The transmission ended, leaving silence that felt heavy with threat. Rachel and Agent Reynolds both understood what they had just heard. The corruption network had decided she was too dangerous to leave alive. Miss Morgan, you need to disappear tonight. Don't go home. Don't contact anyone. Don't use credit cards or phones. They're coming for you. What about the evidence? What about the November 15th operation? We'll figure that out after you're safe. Right now, survival is your only priority. But even as Agent Reynolds spoke, Rachel was making a different calculation. She had evidence that could expose 37 years of murder and corruption. She had intercepted communications about an upcoming operation that would claim more lives. And she had skills and knowledge that might be the key to finally bringing justice for Patricia Martinez, Thomas Wilson, and 13 other people who had trusted the system to protect them. Running might keep her alive, but it would also ensure that the November 15th operation proceeded as planned, that more families would spend decades wondering what happened to their loved ones. Agent Reynolds, I appreciate the advice, but I'm not running. These people chose the wrong mountains to play their games in, and they chose the wrong person to threaten. Miss Morgan, they're coming tonight. Let them come. But they're going to find out that some people don't disappear as easily as they expect. Rachel ended the call and began preparations for a different kind of battle than she'd fought in Afghanistan, but one that would require all the same skills and determination that had made her one of the Army's most effective soldiers. Duke seemed to sense the change in her demeanor, moving from protective alertness to the focused readiness he'd shown during their most dangerous missions. Together, they would face whatever came through the mountain darkness, and they would make sure that the corruption network learned what it meant to threaten someone who had spent 12 years bringing people home against impossible odds. First, she needed to secure Jason. Eleanor was already awake, moving quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Rachel, you look like you're heading to battle, not a morning hike. They're coming tonight. I need to get Jason somewhere safe, then prepare. Eleanor's expression hardened, the compassionate grandmother instantly replaced by the battle-hardened nurse who had treated wounded soldiers under artillery fire. The Blackwater cabin, Rachel shook her head. Too obvious. They'd check there first. I need something they'd never connect to me. Eleanor considered for a moment. My sister's place in Idaho. She's been in Europe for 6 months. Nobody knows I have a key. It's remote, stocked with supplies, and has no connection to you or Jason. Perfect. How quickly can you leave? 20 minutes. I'll tell Jason it's a special adventure. Boys his age love surprises. Rachel nodded, grateful beyond words for this woman who understood the gravity of the situation without needing explanations. She went to wake Jason, heart aching at the necessary deception. His sleepy smile when she sat on the edge of his bed nearly broke her resolve. Hey, mountain man, how would you like a special adventure with Eleanor today? Jason's eyes widened, instantly alert. What kind of adventure? A secret one. Eleanor's taking you to a cabin in Idaho, like a vacation just for a few days. Are you coming too? The innocent question pierced Rachel's armor. Not right away. I have to finish something important first, but I'll join you as soon as I can. Is it dangerous, what you have to do? Rachel hesitated, weighing truth against protection. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. That's what I have to do. Jason studied her face with an intensity beyond his years. Like in Afghanistan, when you rescued people a little like that, I need you to be brave for me. Go with Eleanor, do what she says, and know that I'll come for you as soon as I can. Jason nodded solemnly, then reached under his pillow and pulled out a small wooden figure a wolf he'd carved in his woodworking class. Take this, for protection. Rachel accepted the gift, throat tight with emotion. She would face whatever came for her tonight, not just for the 15 victims from 1987 or the potential victims of November 15th, but for this extraordinary boy who understood sacrifice and courage far too young. Within the hour, Eleanor's ancient but reliable Jeep was packed with essentials and heading north toward Idaho. Rachel watched until they disappeared around the mountain curve, then turned back to the cabin. She had preparations to make before nightfall. First, she returned to the train car, moving through the forest with heightened caution. The clearing appeared undisturbed, but Rachel noticed subtle differences: broken twigs on the approach path, a disturbed patch of soil near the door. Someone had been here since yesterday. Inside, the industrial cleaning smell was stronger. The steel rings on the floor gleamed dully in her flashlight beam, recently polished. Someone was preparing the space for its next victims. Rachel moved directly to the conductor's station, searching for the hidden compartment Agent Reynolds had mentioned. Behind the desk, a section of paneling looked slightly different from its surroundings. She pressed carefully around the edges until she heard a faint click. The panel swung inward, revealing a small storage space. Inside, wrapped in waterproof plastic, were dozens of personal items. Watches, jewelry, wallets, glasses, each tagged with dates spanning from 1987 to just 6 months ago. Rachel photographed everything, careful not to disturb the arrangement. Each item represented a person who had died in this place whose family might still be searching for answers. Among the items was a child's small teddy bear tagged with a date from just last year. The sight of it made Rachel's chest constrict. A child had died here in this makeshift prison at the hands of people with enough power to make the death disappear from official records. A military communication device sat at the back of the compartment, old but still functional, still charged. When Rachel activated it, the display showed recent message logs, communications between someone using the call sign Phoenix and another using Control. The messages were brief but chilling. Package delivered. Cleanup required. Understood. Standard protocols. Next delivery scheduled for November 15th. Confirmed. Route Alpha. November 15th was 3 weeks away. Whatever operation was using this train car, it wasn't finished. More people were going to disappear. More personal effects would join the collection in the hidden compartment. Rachel photographed everything, secured samples in evidence bags, and carefully returned the compartment to its original state. As she prepared to leave, Duke's low growl warned her that they were no longer alone. Through the trees, she could see movement, at least 3 people approaching the clearing from different directions, moving with the coordinated precision of a tactical team. They had been watching the location, waiting for her to return, and now they were closing in. Rachel's military training had prepared her for exactly this situation. She knew these forests better than anyone, and she had Duke's senses to guide her through terrain that would challenge even experienced trackers. But she also knew that escape was only the first step in what had become a much larger battle. The evidence she'd gathered proved that the 1987 disappearances were part of an ongoing operation, that people were still dying, and that powerful forces were committed to keeping their secrets buried. Agent Reynolds might be her only ally in exposing the truth, but reaching her would require surviving the next few hours. Rachel signaled Duke to follow and melted into the forest with the silence and efficiency that had made her one of the Army's most successful search and rescue specialists. Behind her, she could hear the tactical team reaching the train car, their voices sharp with frustration when they found no trace of their target. The hunt had begun in earnest, but Rachel Morgan had spent 12 years learning how to survive when the odds were against her. She had evidence. She had skills. She had a partner whose loyalty had been proven in the mountains of Afghanistan. Most importantly, she had a purpose that burned stronger than her desire for safety. 15 people had died in 1987, and more would die in November unless she stopped it. The path ahead was dangerous, possibly fatal, but Rachel moved through the forest with the certainty of someone who had found her true mission. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you're not looking for them. And sometimes life changes in the space between one footstep and the next. Rachel moved through the forest with practiced stealth Duke at her side. Years of navigating Afghanistan's unforgiving terrain had taught her how to become invisible when necessary. Here in her mountains, she held every advantage. The men pursuing her relied on technology and firepower. She had intimate knowledge of every ridge and ravine, every hidden pathway invisible to satellite imagery. The tactical team fanned out behind her, their movements betrayed by radio chatter and breaking branches. Rachel led them deeper into increasingly difficult terrain while circling back toward a series of caves she discovered years ago. As darkness fell, she disappeared into the narrowest passage, Duke following silently. From this vantage point, she could observe her pursuers' flashlights sweeping the forest below while remaining completely hidden. Night in the Colorado mountains brought bitter cold this time of year. The men below weren't prepared for extended outdoor operations in these conditions. Rachel, however, had survival gear in her pack, essential equipment she never hiked without. She unfolded a thermal blanket, creating a small pocket of warmth for herself and Duke, while monitoring the communication device. Phoenix to Control, target evaded, initial intercept, implementing wider search pattern. Control to Phoenix, negative. Weather front approaching, Extract team and resume surveillance on primary location. Target will return to child eventually. The casual mention of Jason sent ice through Rachel's veins colder than the mountain air. These people knew about her son, but they didn't know he was already safely hidden. Their assumption that she'd return home gave her a critical advantage. Rachel checked her phone. No service in these mountains, which was both protection and hindrance. She couldn't contact Agent Reynolds, but neither could anyone track her location. She'd need to descend to lower elevation to reestablish communication, but not before her pursuers retreated. Hours passed. The tactical team eventually withdrew their frustration, evident in the crashing sounds of their departure. Rachel remained motionless, Duke's body heat and unwavering vigilance, her only companions in the darkness. The small wooden wolf carving from Jason pressed against her chest inside her jacket pocket, a tangible reminder of what she was fighting for. Dawn brought clear skies and the opportunity to move. Rachel navigated down a different slope than she'd ascended, using game trails and creek beds to mask her passage. 5 miles east, she found the signal she needed and placed an encrypted call to Agent Reynolds. I lost a team of operatives in the mountains. They mentioned surveillance on my home and referenced my son. Agent Reynolds' voice tightened. They're escalating faster than expected. Where are you now? Secure. My son is also secure at a location they won't connect to us. I returned to the train car before they arrived. Found the compartment with personal effects, dozens of them, dating from 1987 to within the last year, including a child's toy from 2022. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. That confirms my worst fears. The operation hasn't just continued, it's expanded. I need you to meet someone. Sarah Wilson, Thomas Wilson's daughter. She's been conducting her own investigation for years and has materials that might help us understand what we're dealing with. Rachel calculated risks. Meeting anyone now would create vulnerability, but she needed allies and information. Is it safe to meet in public? Nowhere is completely safe, but they'll be expecting you to hide, not to move in plain sight. There's a diner in Cedar Falls Millie's. Sarah will be there at noon back booth. She'll be wearing a Denver Broncos cap and reading a paperback Western novel. Very specific. When you've been investigating the same case for 37 years, you learn to be precise about recognition signals. She'll have information about her father that might help us understand what we're dealing with. The call ended, leaving Rachel with 4 hours until the meeting. She needed to change clothes, retrieve emergency cash, and approach Cedar Falls without being noticed. Most importantly, she needed to assess whether her cabin was under surveillance without being spotted herself. Using forest cover, Rachel approached her property from the rear, climbing a ridge that overlooked her small homestead. Through binoculars, she confirmed her suspicions: 2 men in a parked SUV at the end of her driveway, and likely others positioned around the perimeter. The casual thoroughness of their operations suggested professionals with significant resources. Rachel backtracked 2 miles to a storage shed hidden on public land, one of several emergency caches she'd established years ago. Inside were clothes, cash, a prepaid phone, and a set of identification documents she'd hoped never to need. The habits of Afghanistan died hard. She'd always maintained backup plans for worst-case scenarios. Clean clothes, a different jacket, hair tucked under a cap, simple disguises that changed her silhouette and general appearance without attempting elaborate deception. Duke would be too recognizable, so she secured him in the shed with water, food, and a familiar blanket promising to return. The walk into Cedar Falls took nearly an hour. Rachel timed her arrival to coincide with the lunch rush. More people meant better cover. Millie's Diner sat at the town's center, a chrome and neon landmark that had served the community for decades. Rachel entered, casually scanning for threats before identifying the woman in the back booth wearing a Broncos cap, her face hidden behind a worn Louis L'Amour paperback. Rachel slid into the booth across from Sarah Wilson. The book lowered, revealing a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes that evaluated Rachel with immediate intelligence. The resemblance to the photograph on Thomas Wilson's pocket watch was subtle but unmistakable. The same determined set of the jaw, the same analytical gaze. Sarah Wilson closed her book without marking the page. "You found my father's watch." Rachel nodded, keeping her voice low. "And a passenger manifest with his name on it. From September 15th, 1987. Sarah's fingers tightened around her coffee mug, knuckles whitening. "I was 12 when he disappeared. Mom got a call saying there had been an accident, that the train he was conducting had derailed. No bodies were ever recovered. She died still believing that version. But you didn't. Sarah reached into her bag and removed a leather journal, sliding it across the table. This was his personal diary. He left it in our safety deposit box the day before that final trip. I found it after Mom died when I was clearing out her things. It's why I've spent 25 years looking for the truth. Rachel opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with neat, precise handwriting, meticulous observations, dates, names, locations. Thomas Wilson had documented conversations, concerns, and suspicions in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. He knew they were in danger. Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. The witnesses on that train had started comparing notes, realizing information about their new identities and destinations was being leaked. My father overheard them discussing their fears. He wrote everything down, planning to report it when they reached Salt Lake City. He never made it. Rachel turned the pages, scanning entries from August and early September 1987. Wilson had documented meetings between witnesses, noting their growing paranoia. The final pages contained three names that Wilson had circled repeatedly: Deputy Director Marcus Webb of the U.S. Marshal Service, Federal Prosecutor Janet Morrison, and Detective Lieutenant Paul Hayes of the Denver Police Department. My father suspected these three of being compromised, of working for the criminal network the witnesses were going to testify against. Rachel recalled Agent Reynolds' sharp intake of breath when she'd mentioned these names. Marcus Webb is now director of the U.S. Marshal Service. Janet Morrison became a federal judge. Paul Hayes retired as chief of police in Denver and works as a security consultant for major corporations. Sarah's bitter smile held no humor. 37 years building careers on the foundation of murder. I've tried investigating them myself, but every time I got close to something significant, obstacles appeared. Records would be sealed, witnesses would refuse to talk, investigators would be transferred. They've been watching you, Rachel realized, probably since you were old enough to ask questions about your father's disappearance. They've been managing your investigation, allowing you to find enough to keep you searching, but nothing that could threaten them. The manipulation was staggering in its scope and cruelty. For 25 years, Sarah Wilson had been unknowingly dancing to the tune of her father's killers, her desperate search for answers used as an early warning system for any real threats to their security. But something's changed. The communication device I intercepted suggests they're more concerned now than they've been in years. Sarah leaned forward, voice dropping further. Because time is running out. Marcus Webb retires next year. Janet Morrison has health problems. Paul Hayes is in his 70s. The original conspirators are reaching the end of their careers, and they're trying to clean up loose ends before they lose the institutional power to protect themselves. The November 15th operation, Rachel said, understanding dawning. It's not just another murder. It's part of a larger cleanup. Sarah nodded grimly. I've been tracking unusual activity in witness protection, federal investigations, and certain corporate security operations. Multiple people who could potentially threaten the network have been identified and are being systematically eliminated. How many people are we talking about? At least a dozen, possibly more. Investigators, journalists, former associates who might have kept records, anyone who represents a potential threat to the conspiracy's continued secrecy. The waitress approached, forcing a pause in their conversation. Rachel ordered coffee, maintaining a casual demeanor until they were alone again. We need to meet with Agent Reynolds. Compare what we know, develop a strategy. Sarah hesitated, caution evident in her expression. I need to know I can trust her. Many people have claimed to want to help me over the years. Some disappeared. Others suddenly stopped returning calls. A few tried to feed me false information. Rachel understood the caution. Reynolds was pulled off the train at the last minute in 1987. Her partner died while she survived. That kind of scenario breeds suspicion. Sarah studied Rachel's face. Why are you involved in this? You weren't even born when this happened. Rachel thought of Jason's wooden wolf still in her pocket. Because I have a son who deserves to grow up in a world where people with power can't just make others disappear. Because 15 people trusted the system and the system murdered them. And because I can't walk away from this knowing more people will die if I do nothing. Sarah seemed to reach a decision. Reynolds isn't the only one I've been working with. There's someone else you need to meet. Michael Collins, former military, now works private security. He's been helping me access information I couldn't get on my own. The name struck Rachel like a physical blow. Michael Collins. You know him. We served in Afghanistan together. At least, that's what he told me when he approached me in Cedar Falls 2 days ago. Sarah's expression sharpened. That's impossible. Michael was never in Afghanistan. His father was one of the witnesses on that train in 1987. Michael was 5 years old when his father disappeared. Rachel's mind raced, reassessing every interaction with the man who'd claimed to be her former comrade. The coincidental meeting at the coffee shop, his offer of help, the casual questions about her movements in the mountains. He lied to me, tried to get close to monitor what I'd found. Maybe. Or maybe he's playing a deeper game. Michael operates in shadows, gathering intelligence on the network from the inside. He infiltrated Hayes' security company 3 years ago, feeding me information about their operations while maintaining his cover. Double agent or triple. The possibilities multiplied, each carrying its own dangers. Rachel couldn't afford to trust blindly, not with Jason's safety at stake. I need to meet him face to face. Confront him with what I know. Sarah shook her head. Too dangerous right now. Hayes has his people watching for you, and Michael can't risk being seen with either of us. We need to meet Agent Reynolds first, compare intelligence, then decide how to proceed with Michael. The diner's front door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and two men in casual clothing that couldn't quite disguise their purpose. Rachel recognized the purposeful scan of the room, the subtle hand positioning for quick weapon access. Sarah noticed too, her body tensing imperceptibly. Without hurrying, Rachel placed cash on the table. Back exit through the kitchen. Act natural. They slid from the booth, moving toward the restrooms at the diner's rear. The kitchen door stood ajar, a busy lunch rush, providing perfect cover as they slipped through. The cook glanced up, recognition flickering across his features, but he returned to his grill without comment. In a small town like Cedar Falls, people minded their business. The alley behind Millie's offered multiple escape routes. Rachel chose the narrowest passage leading to a service road that connected with the town's main street. They emerged 2 blocks from the diner, no sign of pursuit yet. Sarah already had keys in hand. My car's at the municipal lot. We need to move quickly. An aging Subaru waited in the public parking area, unremarkable among the other vehicles. Sarah drove with the confidence of someone familiar with evasion techniques, taking multiple turns through residential streets before heading toward the highway. Agent Reynolds is meeting us at a safe house about 40 minutes from here. We maintain several locations off the official grid, places the network doesn't know about. Rachel watched the side mirrors for signs of pursuit. Who's we? Sarah kept her eyes on the road. People who want justice for what happened in 1987. People who've lost family members to this network over the years. We call ourselves the disappeared. Rachel absorbed this new information. For years, she'd thought her isolation in the mountains was a retreat from human connection. Now she realized it might have been preparation for this moment, training herself to function without institutional support, learning the terrain that would become her battlefield. Sarah navigated mountain roads with practiced ease, occasionally checking her mirrors, but never showing signs of concern. After 30 minutes, she turned onto an unmarked dirt road that wound higher into the hills, eventually stopping before a modest cabin nestled among pines. Agent Reynolds stood on the porch, her rigid posture betraying tension, despite her attempt at casualness. The woman's face showed the marks of a decades-long obsession, deep lines around shrewd eyes, mouth set in permanent determination. She motioned them inside quickly. The cabin's interior was Spartan, but functional, a main room serving as both living area and operational center, with maps and photographs covering one wall. A wood stove provided heat, and solar panels on the roof powered basic electronics. It was a place designed for people who needed to remain off the grid. Agent Reynolds secured the door behind them. Were you followed? Sarah shook her head. Clean exit through Millie's kitchen. No tails on the drive. Reynolds nodded, satisfied. Then we have work to do. Miss Morgan, Sarah tells me you have photographs of the personal effects compartment. Rachel connected her phone to the printer on a small desk, producing images of the hidden compartment and its contents. Reynolds spread them across a table, examining each with forensic attention. 43 distinct individuals based on these items. 15 from the original train, 28 more over the years since. Each tag includes a date and what appears to be initials, processing marks from whoever maintains their records. Sarah studied the photographs with similar intensity. My father's watch isn't here. Neither are any of his personal effects that would have been with him on the train. Because he was staff, not a target, Reynolds explained. The conductor and crew were collateral damage, not the primary objectives. Their belongings wouldn't have been processed the same way. Rachel pointed to the military communication device visible in one photo. I was able to intercept transmissions about their November operation. They're planning to bring multiple targets to the site on the 15th, eliminate them simultaneously, then destroy all evidence. Reynolds' expression hardened. That fits with intelligence I've been gathering. Webb's retirement announcement is scheduled for December. Morrison has been quietly transferring assets to offshore accounts. Hayes has been conducting an unusual number of security assessments for high-profile clients. They're preparing for a major transition. Sarah unfolded a map of Colorado marking locations with a red pen. 3 executives who were prepared to testify about corporate bribery schemes disappeared last month. A journalist investigating judicial corruption had her apartment broken into last week. And Michael reports that Hayes' security firm has been recruiting former military personnel with special operations experience. The picture forming was grim, a coordinated operation to eliminate witnesses, destroy evidence, and erase the final threads that could connect the original conspirators to decades of murder. But the scope of the conspiracy raised a troubling question. How have they maintained this operation for 37 years without exposure? Rachel asked. Someone would have talked, made mistakes, left evidence. Reynolds moved to the wall of photographs and documents. They operate on a cell structure. Each group knows only what they need to know. The foot soldiers who do the actual killing never see the people giving the orders. The financial backers never meet the operatives. It's a system designed to ensure that no single person knows enough to bring down the entire network. Sarah pointed to photographs of Webb, Morrison, and Hayes, and these 3 at the top, plus a handful of others, maintain absolute discipline. They communicate through cutouts and coded messages. They've built legitimate public careers as cover while running this shadow operation. The organizational sophistication suggested something beyond typical corruption. This isn't just about covering up witness murders from 1987. This is an ongoing criminal enterprise using government resources. Reynolds nodded grimly. What started as a conspiracy to protect corrupt officials has evolved into something much larger. They've spent decades building connections between organized crime corporate interests and government agencies. The people who died in 1987 were going to expose bribery and local corruption. The network now handles money laundering influence, peddling, and strategic elimination of threats across multiple states. The cabin door opened suddenly, causing all 3 women to reach for weapons. Michael Collins stepped inside, hands raised slightly to show he was unarmed. His eyes found Rachel's immediately. You need to come with me now. They've located your son. Rachel's blood turned to ice. Impossible. He's hundreds of miles from here with Eleanor. Michael's expression remained grim. They found Eleanor's connection to her sister in Idaho. Teams are already en route. We have maybe 2 hours before they reach the property. Rachel's mind raced through possibilities, dismissing most immediately. How do you know this, and why should I believe you after you lied about knowing me in Afghanistan? A shadow crossed Michael's face. I needed to get close to you quickly when you found the train car, claiming a connection was the fastest way. I've been tracking the network's operations for 15 years, ever since I found my father's journals and realized he hadn't died in an accident. Sarah stepped between them. Michael has proven himself to me many times over. If he says your son is in danger, I believe him. Reynolds remained skeptical. What's your source on the Idaho location? Michael glanced at his watch, impatience evident. I have access to Hayes' communication systems. They identified a property in Eleanor's sister's name this morning. Facial recognition from traffic cameras confirmed Eleanor, and a child matching Jason's description, crossed into Idaho yesterday. They've deployed a 4-man team ETA 90 minutes. Rachel didn't hesitate. I need transportation to Idaho immediately. Already arranged, Michael said. Helicopter waiting at a private airfield 20 minutes from here. We can be on the ground near the property in under 2 hours if we leave now. Reynolds' expression revealed conflict. This could be a trap. They might be using your son to draw you out. Rachel met the agent's gaze directly. That's a risk I have to take. You continue working the November 15th operation. If this is legitimate, I'll get Jason to safety and rejoin you. If not, the unspoken possibility hung in the air. If Michael was leading her into a trap, she might not return at all. but no risk assessment could override her primary mission protecting her son. "I'm coming with you," Sarah insisted. "You'll need backup, and I've worked with Michael long enough to know when he's holding something back." Michael's jaw tightened, but he didn't object. Reynolds reluctantly agreed to continue investigating the larger operation while they rescued Jason. Within minutes, they were in Michael's SUV racing toward the airfield. The helicopter waited as promised, a civilian model with the logos of a private forestry service. The pilot asked no questions as they boarded, suggesting this wasn't his first covert operation. Rachel sat rigid during the flight, mentally preparing for every scenario while clinging to the small wooden wolf in her pocket. Below them, the landscape transformed from Colorado mountains to Idaho forests. Michael provided coordinates for a landing zone 3 miles from Eleanor's sister's cabin, close enough for quick access, far enough to avoid alerting anyone watching the property. The pilot set them down in a small clearing as twilight approached. As the helicopter departed, Michael distributed equipment from his pack communications devices, tactical vests, and weapons. "The network team will be running standard extraction," Michael explained, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. "4-man unit non-lethal approach initially, since they want the targets alive for questioning. They'll secure the perimeter cut communications, then enter through multiple access points simultaneously." Rachel loaded her sidearm, the familiar weight, both comfort and burden. "How did you really get this intelligence? Hayes wouldn't leave operation details where someone could access them." Michael hesitated, then met her eyes directly. "Because I'm the one who identified the Idaho property for them. I'm their analyst for this operation." Sarah's weapon swung toward Michael's chest. "You betrayed us." Michael remained unnaturally still. "I gave them the location because it was only a matter of time before they found it on their own. This way, I know exactly when and how they're moving, which gives us the advantage. I've been playing both sides for years, maintaining my cover while feeding just enough legitimate intelligence to stay valuable to Hayes." Rachel studied the man, weighing his explanation against her instincts. A double agent walked the thinnest of lines. One misstep meant death. The stress of such an existence would break most people, yet Michael appeared remarkably composed. Either he's telling the truth or he's the best operative I've ever encountered. The growing darkness demanded action, regardless of trust issues. Rachel took command naturally, her military experience asserting itself. "We move in from the east using forest cover. Approach to observation distance, assess their deployment, then counter accordingly. Priority 1 is extracting Jason and Eleanor without harm. Clear both." Sarah and Michael nodded, any disagreements temporarily set aside in service of the immediate mission. They moved through the forest with practiced stealth communication reduced to hand signals and occasional whispers. The cabin came into view after 40 minutes of careful navigation, a rustic structure nestled among pine trees, warm light glowing from its windows. The peaceful scene belied the danger approaching. Rachel scanned the surrounding area, identifying the network team's vehicles concealed 300 yards west of the property. 4 men were already deploying around the cabin's perimeter, moving with the coordinated efficiency of professionals. Their equipment and positioning confirmed Michael's assessment. This was a capture operation, not an assassination. Rachel noted each team member's position, evaluating options. "I need to get inside before they make their move. Create a distraction on the western perimeter in 5 minutes. Make it loud enough to draw at least 2 of them away from the house." Without waiting for acknowledgement, Rachel circled to the cabin's eastern approach, using every shadow and tree for cover. The skills that had kept her alive in Afghanistan's mountains served her perfectly in these woods. She reached the back door, unseen, checking for security systems before attempting entry. Eleanor's voice came through the door before Rachel could knock. "I know you're out there, Rachel. The alarm system shows movement on the porch." Rachel kept her voice low. "There are 4 men surrounding the property. We have maybe 3 minutes before they move in. I need to get you and Jason out immediately." The door opened just enough to admit her, Eleanor's face tight with controlled fear. The older woman wore a sidearm holstered at her hip, a reminder of her own military background. "Jason is in the basement safe room. I detected surveillance drones 2 hours ago and implemented protocols." Rachel followed Eleanor through the cabin to a concealed hatch beneath a rug in the pantry. The basement below was really a reinforced bunker. Eleanor's sister apparently shared the family tendency toward preparation. Jason sat on a cot, a book open beside him, eyes widening when he saw his mother. His expression showed both relief and fear. You came. Rachel gathered him into a fierce embrace, allowing herself 3 seconds of pure emotion before refocusing on their escape. We need to move fast. There's a team outside preparing to breach the cabin. Eleanor was already gathering essentials into a pack. The tunnel exit is 50 yards east, emerges in the root cellar of the old groundskeeper's cottage. From there, we have forest cover all the way to the highway. An explosion rocked the night, Sarah and Michael's distraction on the western perimeter. Shouts and running footsteps followed as the network team responded to the perceived threat. Now. Rachel led Jason into the narrow tunnel, Eleanor following with practiced efficiency. The passage was barely 5 feet high, forcing Rachel to crouch as she moved forward. Jason showed no fear, only the focused determination she'd tried to instill in him through years of wilderness training. The tunnel ended at a ladder leading to a trap door. Rachel climbed first, checking for threats, before helping Jason and Eleanor up into an abandoned cottage. Through a grimy window, she could see flashlight beams sweeping the area around the main cabin as the network team searched for the source of the explosion. We have maybe 2 minutes before they realize we're not in the house. The forest line is 20 yards from the back door. We move on my signal straight to the trees, no stopping. Jason nodded, face pale but resolute. Duke would be proud of me, right? For being brave, the simple question nearly broke Rachel's composure. Yes, Mountain Man, Duke would be very proud, just like I am. They slipped from the cottage into the darkness, moving swiftly toward the tree line. 19 yards. 15. 10. The forest protection seemed to stretch away, with each step time expanding in the heightened awareness of danger. A shout from behind them shattered the night. There by the old cottage, a flashlight beam swept toward them, catching Eleanor's silver hair in its glow. The older woman didn't hesitate, pushing Jason forward toward Rachel. Keep going. I'll slow them down. Before Rachel could object, Eleanor turned, drawing her weapon and firing 2 precise shots toward their pursuers. The network team scattered for cover, buying precious seconds as Rachel pulled Jason into the forest, concealing darkness. Gunfire erupted behind them, not the controlled shots of Eleanor's weapon, but automatic fire from multiple sources. Rachel forced herself not to look back, focusing entirely on moving her son to safety. The sound of helicopter rotors suddenly cut through the night, a powerful spotlight sweeping the forest from above. They've called in air support. We need deeper cover. Rachel navigated by instinct, leading Jason into a dense stand of pines where overhead branches would block aerial observation. The boy moved with surprising agility, his small size an advantage in the tight spaces between trees. A figure materialized from the darkness ahead, causing Rachel to raise her weapon instantly. Michael raised his hands quickly. It's me. Sarah's engaging, 2 of them near the main road. The helicopter complicates extraction. We need to change plans. Rachel kept her weapon steady, trust still a luxury she couldn't afford. Where's the extraction point? Michael pointed east. 2 miles, small clearing. My contacts bringing ground transportation. We need to move now before they establish a proper search perimeter. Rachel weighed options quickly. The immediate need to get Jason to safety outweighed her lingering suspicions about Michael. She lowered her weapon, but maintained operational vigilance as they moved deeper into the forest. Jason stumbled on unseen roots, fatigue evident in his movements. Rachel scooped him up without breaking stride, her son's weight nothing compared to the equipment she'd carried in Afghanistan. His arms wrapped around her neck, face pressed against her shoulder. I knew you'd come, he whispered, voice muffled against her jacket. I saw you in my dreams fighting the bad men. Rachel's throat tightened. The simple faith of a child, something the network with all its power and resources could never understand or defeat. She pressed forward with renewed determination, Michael leading them through the darkened forest with surprising confidence, given the limited visibility. The helicopter spotlight continued sweeping the area behind them, its search pattern suggesting they hadn't yet identified the direction of escape. The sound of distant gunfire had ceased, leaving Rachel to wonder about Eleanor's fate. The older woman had risked everything to buy them time, one more debt that would be repaid when this was over. Michael stopped suddenly, raising a hand for silence. Rachel froze, detecting what had alerted him. Voices approaching from the east, their intended escape route. They've cut us off, Michael whispered. They must have dropped teams ahead of our position. Rachel assessed their options. North would lead deeper into wilderness, temporary safety, but increasing danger as supplies dwindled. South led back toward the cabin and certain capture. West offered the most promising escape route, but required crossing more exposed terrain. Jason tugged at her sleeve. This way, his voice barely audible. I know a path. Rachel hesitated, but the confidence in her son's expression was compelling. She nodded, allowing Jason to lead, while she and Michael provided security. The boy moved with surprising certainty, following what appeared to be game trails, invisible in the darkness. After 20 minutes of careful movement, the forest opened to reveal a small stream cutting through the landscape. Jason pointed to the water. We walk in the stream. They can't follow our footprints. The tactical wisdom from her 10-year-old son might have been amusing in other circumstances. Now it simply confirmed what Rachel had long suspected. Jason absorbed everything she taught him about wilderness survival, filing it away for moments like this. They waded into the cold water, using the stream bed as their pathway while the current erased all evidence of their passage. The icy flow numbed Rachel's feet through her hiking boots, but she welcomed the discomfort as proof they were still fighting, still moving. Michael checked his watch, concern evident in his expression. If Sarah made it to the extraction point, they've already gone. We need to establish a new exit strategy. Rachel's trust in Michael remained cautious at best. His story about playing both sides could be true, or he could be herding them toward a trap. The complexity of the situation demanded vigilance without paranoia, a delicate balance she'd learned in combat zones. The stream led them to a small waterfall beyond which lay a meadow silvered by moonlight. The open space represented dangerous exposure, but also faster movement. Rachel scanned the tree line for any sign of pursuit before making her decision. We cross here fast and low, hit the trees on the far side and continue west. There should be a Forest Service road within a mile if my orientation is correct. Jason, still leading with unusual confidence, nodded in agreement. The road goes to a ranger station. It has a radio. Rachel wondered briefly how her son knew this detail, but had no time to question it. They crossed the meadow in a crouching run, the open ground seeming to stretch endlessly under the moon's revealing light. Each step exposed them further, each second an eternity of vulnerability. They reached the western tree line without incident, plunging gratefully into forest cover once more. Jason's stamina was fading, his earlier confidence giving way to the natural exhaustion of a child pushed beyond normal limits. Rachel carried him again, following Michael's lead through increasingly dense underbrush. The Forest Service road appeared as predicted, a narrow gravel path cutting through the wilderness. Michael surveyed it carefully before allowing them to approach. No tire tracks, no signs of recent use. Probably seasonal access only. The ranger station should be north, but it might be unmanned this time of year. Rachel calculated distances and time. Even unmanned, a ranger station would have emergency communications, possibly vehicles and supplies. It represented their best chance of re-establishing contact with Agent Reynolds and Sarah. How did you know about the road and ranger station? She asked Jason quietly as they began moving north along the gravel path. Jason's exhausted face showed confusion. I don't know. I just saw it like in a movie in my head. I saw us getting away from the bad men. Rachel exchanged a glance with Michael, who seemed equally puzzled by the boy's response. Children sometimes demonstrated unusual intuition, but Jason's precise knowledge of escape routes went beyond normal explanation. The ranger station appeared after 30 minutes of cautious progress, a small wooden structure with a metal roof currently dark and apparently unoccupied. Michael approached, first checking windows and doors, while Rachel kept Jason in the protective shadows. Clear. Lock is simple. I can get us inside without damage. Michael's skills with locks raised more questions about his background, but Rachel filed them away for later consideration. Within minutes, they were inside the station, securing doors and windows behind them. The building's interior was basic but functional, a main office with radio equipment, a small kitchen area, and a bunk room for overnight staff. Solar panels on the roof connected to a battery system, providing limited electricity even while the station was unmanned. Michael went immediately to the radio, attempting to establish communication while Rachel searched for supplies. She found emergency rations, water, and basic medical equipment, enough to sustain them for several days if necessary. Jason collapsed onto one of the bunks, adrenaline depletion finally overcoming his remarkable endurance. Rachel covered him with a blanket, brushing hair from his forehead with gentle fingers. His eyes fluttered closed almost immediately, the absolute trust of childhood allowing sleep despite the danger. Radio's working? Michael reported quietly. I've sent a coded message to Sarah's emergency frequency. If she made it out, she'll receive it and coordinate with Reynolds. Rachel nodded, mind already processing next steps. And if she didn't make it out, Michael's expression hardened. Then we need to assume the network knows everything she knew. Our safe houses, our contacts, our plans for November 15th. We'd be starting from zero. Rachel glanced at her sleeping son, the magnitude of their situation settling more fully on her shoulders. Starting from zero was a familiar concept from her military days, all plans compromised, all assumptions, invalid survival, dependent on adaptation and resilience. What about Eleanor? Any way to determine if she survived? Michael shook his head. Not without compromising our position. The network teams would have reported in by now. If they captured her, Hayes will be interrogating her personally. The thought of the older woman in the hands of people who had murdered dozens over decades sent cold anger through Rachel's veins. Eleanor had become family, stepping into the grandmother role for Jason without hesitation. If she had been captured or killed, helping them escape the debt could never be repaid in full. The radio crackled suddenly, breaking the tense silence. A series of tones followed by a single word, sanctuary. Michael's posture relaxed marginally. That's Sarah's confirmation code. She made it out. He responded with another series of tones, then waited. The radio remained silent for nearly a minute before crackling back to life. Reynolds secure, position compromised. Alternate rendezvous, Blackwater 36 hours. Or acknowledge. Michael sent the acknowledgement tones, then turned to Rachel with renewed urgency. They found the cabin safe house. Reynolds has implemented the contingency plan. We're to meet at your Blackwater Creek cabin in 36 hours. Rachel processed this information quickly. The Blackwater cabin was her personal emergency location known only to her and now apparently to Reynolds. The 36-hour window suggested they needed to move cautiously, avoiding main roads and potential surveillance. We need transportation in a circuitous route. Jason needs rest, but we can't stay here past dawn. The network will expand their search perimeter to include all government facilities in the region. Michael nodded in agreement. Station should have a vehicle, not ideal for off-road, but it would get us to the highway. From there, I have contacts who can provide clean transportation without questions. Rachel's military training pushed her to maintain operational security, while her maternal instinct demanded protecting Jason at all costs. The intersection of these imperatives created a clarity of purpose that cut through exhaustion and uncertainty. We move at first light, 5 hours from now. Take watches in rotation, 90 minutes each. I'll take first watch, then you. We wake Jason only when absolutely necessary to move. Michael accepted her authority without question, settling into one of the other bunks, while keeping his weapon within easy reach. The casual comfort with weapons and tactical planning confirmed his military background, whatever else might be true or false about his story. Rachel positioned herself by the window, maintaining a clear view of the approach to the station, while staying hidden from outside observation. The forest beyond the small clearing seemed peaceful, the dangers it concealed temporarily held at bay. In the quiet of her watch, Rachel's mind sorted through the cascade of revelations from the past days. The train car hidden for decades, the ongoing murders of witnesses and threats, the November 15th operation targeting multiple individuals simultaneously, the network's impressive resources and reach into law enforcement and government. Most disturbing was the realization that this conspiracy had operated for 37 years, evolving from a simple cover-up into a sophisticated criminal enterprise with tentacles reaching into multiple states and agencies. Such longevity required not just ruthlessness, but exceptional organizational discipline and intelligence management. The pieces assembled into a coherent picture, but one with disturbing implications. This wasn't a rogue operation run by a few corrupt officials. This was a parallel power structure operating within the legitimate government, a cancer that had grown so gradually that few recognized its existence, much less its extent. Rachel glanced at Jason's sleeping form, the steady rise and fall of his chest a reminder of all that remained at stake. The world he would inherit depended on stopping the November 15th operation and exposing the network behind it. 37 years of murder and corruption had to end no matter the personal cost. Outside, the forest remained still, offering a deceptive peace as Rachel maintained her vigil through the darkest hours of night. The battle ahead would require everything she had learned in Afghanistan and more, but one certainty sustained her through the long watch. Some enemies deserved the full measure of retribution, and this network had earned nothing less than complete destruction. Tomorrow would begin their journey back to Colorado, to Reynolds and Sarah, to the evidence that could finally bring down the conspiracy. But tonight in this temporary shelter, Rachel guarded her son's sleep and prepared for the war to come, a war that would determine not just their survival, but the very nature of justice in a system corrupted from within. The reckoning that Thomas Wilson had died trying to bring about 37 years ago was finally approaching. Rachel intended to ensure it arrived with the force of an avalanche burying the guilty beneath the weight of their own crimes. The Forest Service truck bumped along back roads as dawn broke over the mountains. Rachel's hands gripped the steering wheel muscle memory, navigating the rugged terrain, while her mind calculated threats and escape routes. In the passenger seat, Michael monitored radio frequencies for any sign of pursuit. Jason slept in the back, wrapped in a ranger station blanket, his small face peaceful despite the danger surrounding them. They had escaped the immediate search grid by mere hours, but the network's reach extended far beyond typical law enforcement capabilities. The rendezvous at Blackwater Cabin lay ahead, normally an 8-hour journey, but with roadblocks, surveillance cameras, and potential informants to avoid, they needed at least 18 hours of cautious travel. Jason stirred as sunlight touched his face, waking with the immediate alertness Rachel had noticed since their flight began. No gradual transition from sleep to wakefulness, just sharp awareness. Another survival adaptation forming before her eyes. "Are we going home now?" Jason's voice carried none of the whining one might expect from a child after days of flight. Michael glanced back. "Not directly. We need to meet some friends at a special place first." Rachel caught Jason's eyes in the rearview mirror. "The Blackwater Cabin, remember when we hiked there last summer, where we saw the otters by the creek?" Jason nodded, recognition brightening his face. "Where we caught rainbow trout for dinner, and you taught me how to build a fire with just one match." The simple memory created a sharp contrast with their current reality. Rachel had purchased the remote Blackwater property as a contingency, somewhere to retreat if circumstances required. She'd taken Jason there twice, teaching wilderness skills and creating happy memories, never explicitly telling him the property's true purpose as an emergency fallback. Michael checked his phone again. No signal, both protection and limitation. If Reynolds or Sarah had updated the rendezvous plan, they had no way to receive that message. "We need to change vehicles. This forestry truck is too recognizable." Rachel calculated distances against fuel range. "There's a hunting lodge 30 miles southeast. Old client of mine named Frank Tillman. He owes me a favor and doesn't ask questions." The hunting lodge appeared around noon, a rustic compound of cabins surrounding a main building. Frank Tillman listened to Rachel's abbreviated explanation with the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to respecting others' privacy. He handed over keys to an aging Jeep Cherokee without hesitation. "Need anything else? Food, ammunition, medical supplies." The weathered outfitter's eyes showed concern without invasive curiosity. Rachel accepted provisions while Michael transferred their gear to the Jeep. Jason remained watchful, observing everything with that unnerving intensity that had replaced his usual childish exuberance. The new vehicle carried them eastward along secondary roads, steadily reducing the distance to Blackwater while avoiding populated areas. Michael monitored law enforcement channels, occasionally picking up fragments of transmissions related to their pursuit. Forest Service vehicle recovered at Tillman's Lodge, expanded search parameters to include all secondary roads, priority alert for woman traveling with male child. The scope of the search operation confirmed what Rachel already suspected. The network had deployed significant resources across multiple jurisdictions, coordinating with local law enforcement under the guise of a high-priority fugitive apprehension. Their ability to manipulate official channels suggested governmental resources far beyond normal criminal capabilities. As afternoon faded toward evening, they approached a small town that couldn't be circumvented without adding hours to their journey. Rachel pulled into a roadside motel on the town's outskirts, the kind of establishment that accepted cash and maintained minimal guest records. They secured a room at the rear of the property with clear sight lines to both the parking area and surrounding forest. Rachel established a security rotation with Michael taking first watch, while she helped Jason shower and change into clean clothes purchased at a gas station during their journey. The boy's quiet demeanor persisted, his usual chatter replaced by watchful silence. Rachel sat beside him on the bed, maternal concern temporarily overriding tactical considerations. What's going on in that head of yours, mountain man? Jason studied his hands before meeting her eyes. I keep hearing him. The conductor. He's trying to tell me things about what happened on the train. Rachel weighed her response carefully. She'd witnessed enough of Jason's inexplicable knowledge to no longer dismiss it as imagination, but she still struggled to understand the mechanism behind it. What does he tell you? Jason's brow furrowed. It's like pieces of a movie, but sometimes without sound. I see the train car before it was hidden in the forest. I see people inside who are scared. He's trying to help them, but the bad men are there too. 3 of them watching everything. The names in that journal, Hayes Webb Morrison, they were there. The detail aligned perfectly with Thomas Wilson's journal entries, information Jason couldn't possibly know through conventional means. Something extraordinary was happening, a connection that defied rational explanation, but couldn't be ignored given its accuracy. Michael's urgent whisper interrupted from the window. Movement in the parking lot. 2 vehicles with government plates, tactical approach pattern. Rachel moved instantly, gathering their minimal belongings while Jason put on his shoes without being told. The practiced efficiency of their escape spoke volumes about how quickly the boy had adapted to their new reality. They slipped from the room's rear door into darkness, Michael leading, while Rachel kept Jason between them. The forest behind the motel offered immediate cover, though limited visibility as night descended. Rachel oriented by the stars identifying their direction. Northeast from here. There's a railroad line about 2 miles ahead. We follow it until the junction, then move east toward the mountains. The parking lot behind them erupted with activity. Flashlights shouted commands, doors being breached. Their departure had preceded the tactical team's arrival by mere minutes, suggesting either tracking technology or informants along their route. They maintained the fastest pace Jason could sustain, Rachel occasionally lifting him over obstacles. The railroad tracks appeared as promised, providing a navigable path through otherwise difficult terrain. They followed alongside the rails using tree cover to conceal their movement from potential aerial observation. 3 hours of steady progress brought them to the junction Rachel had referenced, where the main line split, one branch continuing north, the other turning east toward the mountains and eventually Blackwater Creek. Michael halted suddenly, raising a hand for silence. The distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approached from the west. Under the bridge. Now. They scrambled down the embankment to where the tracks crossed a small river. The bridge's concrete supports created shadowed recesses that would shield them from aerial observation, particularly if thermal imaging was deployed. The helicopter spotlight methodically swept along the railroad and illuminating sections of track and surrounding forest. The search pattern suggested they were following the exact route Rachel's group had taken, employing sophisticated tracking methods, despite the darkness. Jason pressed against Rachel, his small body trembling slightly from cold and adrenaline. The river, he whispered, barely audible above the water sounds. We can float downstream. They can't see us under the trees. Rachel exchanged a glance with Michael, the elegant solution momentarily stunning them both. The river flowed generally eastward, the direction they needed to travel. Its canopy of overhanging trees would shield them from aerial observation, while the current would carry them without leaving tracks. Michael nodded. It's cold but not dangerous, and it solves the tracking problem. They slipped into the frigid water, Rachel keeping Jason close as the current carried them downstream. They stayed near the banks where tree coverage was densest, occasionally grabbing roots or rocks to control their speed. Above them, the helicopter continued its search pattern's spotlight, sweeping across the railroad tracks they'd abandoned. The sound gradually diminished as the river carried them beyond the search perimeter. After 20 minutes, Rachel guided them to shore, all 3 shivering, but intact. The river had transported them nearly 2 miles eastward, valuable progress that had simultaneously eliminated their trail. We need to warm up. Michael assessed his training, automatically prioritizing survival threats. Hypothermia is the immediate risk, especially for Jason. Rachel scanned their surroundings, identifying the silhouette of a small structure several hundred yards from the riverbank. They approached cautiously, discovering an abandoned railroad maintenance shed with its roof mostly intact. Michael produced emergency thermal blankets from his pack while Rachel secured the perimeter. Jason huddled between them as they shared body heat, the thin metallic sheets gradually reflecting warmth back to their core. Despite physical exhaustion, Jason's mind remained active. They keep finding us wherever we go. How? The legitimate question highlighted a vulnerability they'd been avoiding. The network's ability to track their movements, suggested capabilities beyond standard law enforcement resources. Michael began methodically checking their clothing and gear, focusing on seams and hidden spaces. His search halted at Jason's backpack, the small pack Rachel had grabbed from their cabin days earlier. There's something sewn into the bottom panel. He used his knife to carefully slit the fabric, revealing a small disc no larger than a button. He crushed it immediately beneath his boot heel. Military-grade tracker, non-commercial signature. They must have placed it during surveillance of your cabin before you found the train car. The implications settled heavily in the musty air. The network had been watching Rachel's family before she'd stumbled onto their operation, perhaps for months. Why were they watching me in the first place? Michael hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Because of me. Hayes had me monitoring potential threats to the network people with backgrounds and skills that might make them dangerous if they discovered certain operations. Former military personnel living near sensitive locations. Your name was on a list I compiled 6 months ago. The admission should have felt like betrayal, but Rachel recognized the complexity of Michael's position. His assessment had identified her as a potential threat, creating the surveillance that led to their current crisis. Yet that same assessment had positioned him to help when the threat materialized. Jason studied Michael with unnerving intensity. There's something else you're not saying about my father. Michael's subtle flinch confirmed the accuracy of Jason's perception. The boy's intuition had transcended conventional understanding, developing into something that approached clairvoyance. Your husband Jason's father was already under surveillance when he received his transfer. He found financial records linking his employer to one of the network's money laundering operations. When he began asking questions, they arranged his move to the Singapore office. Getting him out of the country was cleaner than elimination, especially with a family involved. The revelation reconfigured Rachel's understanding of the past 5 years. David's sudden transfer, growing distance, and eventual abandonment of their family hadn't been simply personal failure. It had been orchestrated by outside forces. Is Dad in danger? Jason asked, his composure remarkable given the circumstances. Michael shook his head. Not directly. They've kept him isolated in international operations, away from evidence connecting to the original investigation. As long as he remains outside the U.S., he's more valuable alive. Rachel processed the tactical implications beyond personal revelation. If the network had been monitoring her family for years, they likely maintained detailed files on their movements, relationships, and patterns, knowledge that represented both vulnerability and potential advantage. Rest now, we move again before dawn. Jason finally succumbed to exhaustion, his breathing deepening into sleep despite the hard floor and minimal comfort. Rachel maintained watch while Michael dozed, her mind processing the expanding layers of conspiracy that seemed to grow with each new revelation. The network's reach extended beyond witness elimination into corporate interests, money laundering, and international operations. The scale suggested resources and coordination more typical of intelligence agencies than criminal organizations. The line between legitimate government and corrupted parallel structures had blurred to near invisibility. Dawn brought clearing skies and the opportunity to assess their position more accurately. With the tracker destroyed, their path to Blackwater Creek faced fewer immediate threats, though the network's resources remained a constant concern. They traveled steadily through the day, alternating between forest cover and rural backroads where surveillance seemed minimal. Jason's resilience continued to impress Rachel, both his physical endurance and his ability to process the dangers surrounding them without panic. By late afternoon, the familiar outline of the Blackwater Mountains appeared on the horizon. The cabin represented not just physical shelter, but the possibility of reuniting with Reynolds and Sarah, combining their evidence and knowledge into a coherent strategy against the November 15th operation. We're 8 miles out, Michael calculated from a paper map, avoiding digital navigation that might be tracked. If we push, we can reach the cabin before full darkness. They maintained a grueling pace through the final hours, Jason occasionally riding on Michael's shoulders when fatigue overwhelmed his determination. The sun had just touched the western peaks when the cabin came into view, a small structure nestled among pines overlooking the creek that gave it its name. Rachel approached cautiously, alert for signs of surveillance or compromise. The cabin appeared undisturbed, exactly as she had left it months earlier. Still, standard security protocols demanded verification before entry. She led them to a hollow tree 30 yards from the cabin, retrieving a key from its concealed location. Not the cabin key, but access to an observation post she'd established with direct sight lines to all approaches. The post contained basic surveillance equipment, nothing electronic or detectable, just quality optics and line-of-sight views. Rachel scanned methodically, checking each potential approach for signs of disturbance or positioned observers. Michael took his turn at the observation point while Jason remained with Rachel. The boy seemed drawn to the cabin, his gaze fixed on it with unusual intensity. "Someone's inside," he whispered. "A woman. She's worried about the red-haired lady." Rachel glanced sharply at her son. "How do you know that I just see it, like I've been seeing other things? It's getting clearer." Michael rejoined them, reporting no visible signs of surveillance, but expressing concern about the absence of Reynolds or Sarah. The cabin should have shown signs of recent activity if they had arrived as planned. Rachel established a simple approach plan. She would advance alone, while Michael maintained overwatch with Jason. Once inside, she would verify the cabin's status and signal all clear if appropriate. The cabin's front door showed no signs of forced entry. Rachel used her key, entering with weapon drawn while scanning for threats or disturbances. The main room appeared exactly as she remembered: rustic furniture, wood stove supply shelves neatly organized against the far wall. But something felt wrong. Rachel moved methodically through the small space, checking hiding places and security measures she'd established previously. The back bedroom door stood slightly ajar, not how she'd left it during her last visit. Rachel approached cautiously, pushing the door open with her weapon ready. Agent Reynolds sat on the edge of the bed, hands visible and empty. Her expression showed strain beyond normal fatigue, the look of someone who had faced hard choices and made harder decisions. "They have Sarah. Hayes's team intercepted us during extraction. I got away. She didn't." The simple statement carried devastating implications. Sarah possessed detailed knowledge of their evidence, contacts, and plans. Under interrogation, that information would compromise everything they had built. Michael appeared in the doorway behind Rachel, having observed her all-clear signal. Jason remained outside at the observation post, temporarily secure. When Michael asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. 18 hours ago, we were approaching the rendezvous when they hit us. Coordinated ambush, at least 6 operators. Professional equipment, military precision. Sarah covered my escape, but they took her alive. Rachel processed this information against their own timeline. The network had captured Sarah while simultaneously tracking Rachel, Jason, and Michael across 3 states. The resource allocation suggested an operation of significant scale, far beyond normal law enforcement capabilities. "Hayes will break her eventually," Michael said flatly. "Nobody holds out forever under the right techniques." Reynolds nodded grimly. "We have to assume they know everything. Sarah knew safe houses, contacts, the evidence we've gathered. Our only advantage is what Sarah didn't know." "The November 15th operation," Rachel said. "The train car location, the personal effects cache." "Not quite. Sarah knew about the train car, but she didn't know about the new evidence you recovered just before extraction. The communication device showing upcoming operations, the complete list of targets for November 15th. Rachel felt the weight of their remaining leverage. Sarah's capture had compromised much of their operational security, but not the core evidence they needed to stop the November 15th massacre and expose the network. Michael retrieved Jason from the observation post, bringing him into the cabin's relative warmth and security. Instead of showing relief at reaching their destination, the boy's attention fixed immediately on Agent Reynolds, studying her with that same unnerving intensity he'd displayed toward Michael earlier. "You're afraid they'll hurt the lady with the red hair," Jason said quietly. "But you're more afraid of what happens if they find out you're still alive after all these years." Reynolds' composure fractured momentarily, genuine shock, displacing professional detachment. She looked to Rachel, who could only offer a small nod of confirmation. "He's been seeing things," Rachel explained. "Things he couldn't possibly know through normal means, including details about the train car and Thomas Wilson." Reynolds studied Jason with renewed interest. "The conductor with the pocket watch has been appearing in your dreams." Jason nodded. "Since my birthday. At first it was just feelings, then pictures. Now sometimes I can hear words. He wants to help the people who are in danger, the ones on the list." The radio in the corner of the main room crackled suddenly to life, a simple receiver powered by the cabin's solar system. All 3 adults tensed, hands moving automatically toward weapons. "Blackwater Base, this is Archangel. Authentication code Sierra Tango Wilson 79er. Do you copy Reynolds' move to the radio with practiced efficiency? Archangel, this is Blackwater. Authentication confirmed. Situation critical. The voice that responded carried unmistakable authority despite the radio's distortion. Blackwater, be advised. Operation Haven compromised at all levels. The following targets confirmed for November 15th. Elimination. Murphy Sanderson, Chen Washington, Kowalski, Rodriguez, Park, Martinez Collins, Wilson, Morgan Reynolds. Rachel recognized the surnames immediately, names from the original passenger manifest now appearing as targets for elimination. The network wasn't just planning to eliminate current threats. They were systematically erasing all connections to the original 1987 operation. Even more chilling was the inclusion of their own names on the target list, Morgan Reynolds Collins. The network had expanded its elimination protocols to include them specifically. Archangel, what is your source on this target list? Reynolds asked after confirming receipt. Source is Director Webb himself. Internal communication intercepted 40 minutes ago. Hayes is deploying 6 tactical teams to priority targets. Morgan and Child designated Alpha priority. Reynolds designated as Bravo. Collins as Charlie. Michael's expression hardened at this confirmation of his status as a network target. His cover as an analyst for Hayes was clearly compromised, likely through Sarah's interrogation. Archangel, what assets are available to counter this operation? All official channels compromised. No conventional assets available. Archangel team consists of 5 operators with independent resources. Rendezvous at emergency coordinates Delta 3 in 6 hours. Bring all evidence and materials. Reynolds acknowledged the instructions, then signed off with practiced efficiency. The cabin fell silent as all 3 adults processed the implications. Who is Archangel? Rachel asked. Deputy Attorney General Rebecca Walsh. She's been building a parallel case against the network for years, working completely outside normal channels. Her team includes FBI Deputy Director Santos and Inspector General Reed, career officials with enough integrity to resist corruption and enough authority to act on evidence if we can get it to them. Rachel calculated time against distance. The emergency coordinates would be at least 4 hours from their current location, even traveling directly. With potential surveillance and the likelihood of pursuit, 6 hours represented a challenging deadline. The radio crackled again, this time broadcasting on emergency frequencies with no authentication codes. Attention in Blackwater Creek area. This is the U.S. Marshal Service. We are conducting a fugitive search operation in your vicinity. Residents should remain indoors until further notice. Any suspicious activity should be reported immediately. Michael checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. They're setting up a perimeter, standard containment protocol. We have maybe 2 hours before they close all exit routes from this valley. Rachel assessed their strategic position. The Blackwater cabin's isolation, once its primary security feature, now created a potential trap with limited escape routes. Jason interrupted their planning with unexpected clarity. We can't go out the main roads. They're already watching. But there's another way through the mountains. Reynolds and Michael exchanged skeptical glances, but Rachel had witnessed enough of Jason's extraordinary perceptions to consider his suggestions seriously. What way? Mountain Man Jason moved to the topographic map pinned to the cabin wall, a detailed representation of the surrounding 50 miles. His finger traced a route that followed no marked trail crossing ridgelines and valleys toward a destination Rachel couldn't immediately identify. There's a train tunnel here. Old, not used anymore. It goes all the way through the mountain and comes out near a town called Riverton on the other side. Reynolds examined the map with professional attention. He's right. That tunnel exists part of an abandoned mining railway from the 1930s. It's not on modern maps because it was officially closed after a partial collapse in the 1960s. How could you possibly know about that tunnel? Michael asked Jason, genuine wonder, replacing his usual operational focus. Jason touched the pocket watch Rachel had recovered from the train car, now carried in a protective case with their evidence. The conductor showed me. He used to work on that line before the Denver route. He says it's the only path they won't be watching. The coincidence stretched credibility beyond reasonable limits. The tunnel wasn't on any modern maps. Jason had never visited this area before. He had no access to historical railway information, yet he had identified their only viable escape route. Reynolds looked from Jason to Rachel, her expression a mix of wonder and professional assessment. If this ability of his is real, And I'm starting to believe it is. It's unlike anything I've encountered in 40 years of law enforcement. Rachel felt a surge of both pride and concern for her son. Whatever was happening with Jason transcended conventional understanding, but it was also placing an enormous burden on a 10-year-old child. We have no better options, Michael concluded pragmatically. Pack only essentials, weapons of evidence, survival gear. We move in 15 minutes. They prepared with military efficiency, gathering only what couldn't be sacrificed or replaced. The evidence remained their most precious cargo: the communication device, the photographs of the personal effects, Thomas Wilson's journal, and the pocket watch that had started this journey. As darkness settled over the mountains, they slipped away from the cabin, moving northeast toward the abandoned tunnel Jason had identified. Rachel took point with Jason directly behind her, then Reynolds with Michael covering their rear. The formation provided maximum protection for both Jason and the evidence. Behind them, lights appeared on the main road into the valley, vehicles approaching with official purpose and lethal intent. They had evaded the network's grasp by mere minutes. The trail to the tunnel followed no established path. Under normal circumstances, navigating such terrain in darkness would be nearly impossible. But Jason moved with uncanny confidence, occasionally correcting their direction with quiet certainty. About a mile in, Rachel paused to check their position against landmarks. Jason tugged at her sleeve, pointing slightly left of their current heading. That way is faster. There's a rock slide ahead on this path. As their journey continued, it became increasingly clear that Jason wasn't just guessing or remembering, he was actively receiving guidance that transcended normal perception. Whether through Thomas Wilson's spectral presence or some other inexplicable mechanism, the boy was navigating with knowledge he couldn't possibly possess. The tunnel entrance appeared after 3 hours of difficult hiking, a dark opening in the mountainside partially concealed by decades of vegetation and rockfall. The original railway tracks had been removed long ago, but the tunnel itself remained a black void cutting through the mountain's heart. Reynolds produced a powerful flashlight from her pack, illuminating the entrance. The beam revealed a passage approximately 15 feet wide and 20 feet high, disappearing into darkness. The air flowing from the opening carried the musty scent of enclosed spaces and mineral deposits. Jason approached the entrance without hesitation. It's safe. The collapse is near the middle, but there's a path around it. The conductor uses it all the time. Michael exchanged a glance with Rachel, silently acknowledging the strangeness of relying on guidance from beyond conventional reality. Yet the alternatives, attempting to breach the network's perimeter or remaining trapped in the valley, presented greater dangers. Reynolds took point, her flashlight illuminating the way forward. Jason followed, then Rachel with Michael again covering their rear. The formation maintained both tactical security and protection for Jason. The tunnel extended into the mountain's heart, cool air, and absolute darkness, creating a disorienting environment relieved only by their flashlight beams. Water trickled down walls lined with century-old brickwork and support timbers. The floor remained relatively level despite years of neglect, making progress easier than expected. After approximately half a mile, they encountered the collapse Reynolds had mentioned. A section of ceiling had given way decades earlier, creating a barrier of fallen rock and timber that blocked the main passage. As Jason had indicated, a narrow path existed around the obstruction, a tight squeeze for adults but navigable. One by one, they made their way through the gap. Jason went first, his smaller size an advantage in the confined space. Reynolds followed, then Rachel. Michael, the largest of the group, struggled momentarily before forcing his way through. Beyond the collapse, the tunnel continued for another mile, gradually sloping upward toward the eastern side of the mountain. Occasional side passages marked abandoned mining operations that had once connected to the railway. Jason moved with increasing confidence, occasionally mentioning details about the tunnel's history that none of the adults could verify, but that carried the ring of authenticity. The miners used to ride the ore carts back to town at the end of their shifts, he explained as they passed a branching tunnel. They weren't supposed to, but the conductor let them because it saved them an hour's walk. Throughout their passage, Rachel noted Jason's growing connection to Thomas Wilson, not as a frightening supernatural experience, but as a comforting presence guiding them to safety. Whatever was happening defied conventional explanation, but its effect was undeniable. After nearly 2 hours underground, a faint glow appeared ahead, the eastern entrance, illuminated by moonlight. They approached cautiously, Reynolds scouting ahead to ensure no surveillance awaited them. The exit opened onto a wooded slope overlooking a valley. In the distance, the lights of Riverton created a small island of illumination in the darkness. They had successfully traversed the mountain, bypassing the network's containment operation entirely. Michael oriented himself using the stars and distant landmarks. Archangel's coordinates are approximately 12 miles southeast of here. If we maintain a steady pace, we can reach the rendezvous with about an hour to spare. They descended the slope, the terrain gradually becoming less severe as they approached lower elevations. Jason showed the first signs of true fatigue, his extraordinary endurance finally reaching its limits. Rachel carried him for stretches, his head resting against her shoulder body, occasionally twitching as he drifted between sleep and wakefulness. Near what's happening, he murmured, during one such moment of semi-consciousness. The conductor says we need to hurry. They're moving the timetable up. Rachel shared this information with Reynolds and Michael. Whether driven by intuition or supernatural guidance, Jason's warnings had proven accurate enough to warrant serious consideration. They increased their pace despite exhaustion, pushing through the final miles toward the rendezvous coordinates. The landscape transitioned from forested slopes to agricultural land on the valley's outskirts, forcing them to move more cautiously to avoid being spotted by local residents. Archangel's coordinates led to an abandoned agricultural processing facility, a complex of concrete buildings and loading docks long since forgotten by the surrounding community. The perfect location for a clandestine meeting isolated multiple approach routes, defensive positions, and escape options. Reynolds led them through a gap in the perimeter fence, approaching the main building with weapon drawn. A soft whistle from the darkness prompted her to respond with a matching pattern authentication protocols established decades earlier. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Deputy Attorney General Rebecca Walsh, Rachel presumed. Behind her, 4 additional figures maintained security positions around the perimeter. Rachel Morgan Walsh acknowledged with a nod. Michael Collins, and this must be Jason. We've been monitoring your progress as best we could without compromising operational security. Her attention turned to the exhausted boy in Rachel's arms, her expression softening momentarily. You've been very brave, young man. What you and your mother have done might save a lot of lives. Jason studied the woman with that same penetrating gaze he'd turned on others. You've been fighting them for a long time, since before I was born. Walsh's eyebrows lifted slightly. Yes, that's right, 27 years. Though not always knowing what I was fighting. She returned her attention to the adults. We need to move immediately. The network has accelerated their timetable. The November 15th operation has been moved up to tomorrow night. Tomorrow, Reynolds' shock was evident. That doesn't give us time to warn all the targets, much less protect them. Walsh led them inside the main building where a temporary command center had been established. Maps, surveillance photos, and communication equipment transformed the abandoned space into a functional headquarters. We're not going to warn them individually, Walsh explained. We're going after the operations command and control structure. Director Webb, Judge Morrison, and Hayes are all gathering at a secure facility tonight to oversee final preparations. If we can capture or neutralize them and seize their operational plans, we can disrupt the entire elimination protocol. A man in his 50s, presumably FBI Deputy Director Santos, approached with a digital tablet. Here's the latest intelligence. Webb is en route to the facility now. Morrison arrived 20 minutes ago. Hayes is coordinating from his security company headquarters but is expected on site by midnight. The facility in question appeared on a large wall-mounted display, a corporate retreat center in the mountains 60 miles west, officially closed for renovations, but actually serving as the network's operational headquarters for the accelerated elimination program. Rachel studied the tactical imagery, her military training automatically assessing approach, routes, security measures, and potential vulnerabilities. The facility was well protected, but not impenetrable, particularly with the element of surprise. What about Sarah, she asked. Is she being held at this location? Walsh nodded. According to our intelligence, yes. They've been interrogating her there since capture. The facility includes specialized areas for such purposes. Michael's expression hardened. She's provided us with a perfect insertion justification. A rescue operation gives us legitimate reason to breach the facility, even if our primary objective is capturing Webb and the others. That's exactly our plan, Santos confirmed. We've assembled a tactical team drawn from trusted personnel across multiple agencies. No official sanction, no formal authorization, just people who recognize the threat this network represents and are willing to risk their careers to stop it. Inspector General Reed, a stern-looking man with a military bearing, addressed the next critical question. What about the evidence we need to ensure it's secure, regardless of the operation's outcome? Reynolds produced a secure case containing the communication device, photographs, journal, and pocket watch. Multiple copies have been secured with trusted individuals who will release everything to major media outlets if anything happens to us. The network can't contain this any longer. Jason had been quiet during this exchange, sitting in a chair too large for his small frame eyes half closed with exhaustion. Suddenly, he straightened his expression, sharpening with that now familiar look of receiving information beyond normal perception. They know we're coming, he said with quiet certainty. Someone told them. The adults exchanged concerned glances. Walsh approached the boy, kneeling to meet his eyes directly. Who told them? Jason, can you see that? Jason frowned, concentrating. It's someone here, someone who's been talking to them for a long time. The conductor doesn't know their name, but he can see them making a call when everyone was busy. The accusation created immediate tension. Walsh stood, her expression grim. We've maintained absolute operational security. Only the people in this room knew about this rendezvous, which meant if Jason's perception was accurate, they had a traitor in their midst. The implications were devastating, their entire plan potentially compromised before execution. Thomas Wilson's story is about to repeat itself, Rachel realized. The witnesses on his train had suspected information leaks, but couldn't identify the source before it was too late. Now, 37 years later, the same pattern was emerging. Michael moved first, securing the exits, while Santos checked communication devices for unauthorized transmissions. Reed began reviewing the tactical plan for signs of compromise. Jason tugged at Rachel's sleeve. Not the people you can see. The conductor says it's someone else. Someone listening. Walsh's expression changed, understanding dawning. She moved quickly to a ventilation grate near the ceiling, pulling it open to reveal a small electronic device hidden inside. Surveillance. Professional grade. They've been monitoring our entire conversation. The discovery confirmed their worst fears. The network already knew their plans, their location, and their intended operation against the mountain facility. The element of surprise had been completely lost, which means they're already responding, Santos concluded, either abandoning the facility or preparing a trap. Rachel looked at her son, seeing both exhaustion and determination in his young face. The extraordinary perceptions that had guided them this far might represent their only remaining advantage. Jason, she asked gently, what does the conductor think we should do? The boy closed his eyes, concentration etching lines in his forehead that no child should have. After several seconds, he opened them again, certainty replacing confusion. We need to split up. They're expecting us all to go to the mountain place. But that's not where the important things are. The real evidence is at Hayes's office. The conductor says someone named Sarah put it there before they caught her. Reynolds and Walsh exchanged significant looks. Sarah Wilson had been captured during extraction, but neither had mentioned precisely when or where she'd been in the hours prior. Is it possible? Walsh asked. Reynolds nodded slowly. She insisted on a solo reconnaissance of Hayes's security headquarters the day before we were ambushed. Said she wanted to assess their operational patterns. I didn't question it at the time. The implications were substantial. If Sarah had managed to place evidence within Hayes's own operational headquarters before her capture, it represented a vulnerability the network wouldn't expect them to exploit, especially if they believed the group was focusing entirely on the mountain facility. It's a divide-and-conquer strategy, Michael assessed. The network is expecting us to commit all our resources to the mountain facility. If we split our forces, we can both rescue Sarah and secure whatever evidence she planted at Hayes's headquarters. The risks were enormous, dividing their already limited resources against an enemy with superior numbers and resources. But the potential reward justified the gamble. Walsh made the decision. Morgan, you and Michael will take a small team to Hayes's headquarters. Your search and rescue background makes you ideal for an extraction operation. Reynolds, Jason, and I will proceed to the mountain facility with the main force. If the network is setting a trap, they'll focus on capturing us and the evidence we're carrying. Rachel's instinct was to keep Jason with her to personally ensure his safety. But Walsh's logic was sound. The network would expect the boy to remain with his mother, making his presence with the second team an additional element of surprise. More importantly, Jason's extraordinary perceptions might prove crucial in navigating whatever trap awaited at the mountain facility. His connection to Thomas Wilson had guided them through the abandoned tunnel. It might similarly guide them through the network's defenses. The plan crystallized quickly. 2 operations, simultaneous timing, coordinated communication. The Mountain team would create a distraction substantial enough to draw the network's primary response, while the smaller team infiltrated Hayes's less protected headquarters to recover the evidence Sarah had planted. As preparations intensified around them, Rachel knelt beside her exhausted son. The mission parameters required their separation, but maternal instinct demanded reassurance. "I need you to go with Agent Reynolds and Deputy Walsh," she explained gently. "They need your special help to find Sarah and stop the bad people." Jason nodded with a maturity beyond his years. "I know. The conductor already told me we have to split up. He'll stay with me and help me see things." Rachel pulled him into a fierce embrace, memorizing the feel of his small body against hers, the scent of his hair, the sound of his breathing. Then she released him, compartmentalizing emotion as her military training had taught her. 5 hours until execution. The 2 teams separated, final preparations unfolding with practiced efficiency. Rachel joined Michael and 3 of Walsh's trusted operators, reviewing floor plans of Hayes's security headquarters, planning insertion points and extraction routes. Throughout the complex, similar preparations focused on the larger operation targeting the Mountain facility. Equipment checked, communication protocols, established contingencies, reviewed. As dawn approached, Rachel found a moment to speak with Reynolds before their teams departed on separate missions. "Keep him safe," Rachel said simply. "With my life," Reynolds promised. "And when this is over, I think we need to have a serious conversation about your son's abilities." There are other children who've demonstrated similar perceptions, not common, but documented. Jason isn't alone in this. The revelation created a strange sense of relief. Whatever extraordinary connection had formed between Jason and Thomas Wilson wasn't isolated or unprecedented. There were frameworks for understanding it, perhaps even ways to help Jason manage these perceptions as he grew older. Their conversation was interrupted by Walsh's signal, "Time to move." The teams departed in separate vehicles, heading toward objectives that would determine not just their personal survival, but the future of a corruption network that had operated with impunity for 37 years. As Rachel's team traveled toward Hayes's headquarters, she thought of Jason, her extraordinary son, now directly involved in confronting the conspiracy they'd stumbled into just days earlier. Fear mingled with fierce pride. Whatever happened in the coming hours, Jason Morgan had already demonstrated courage and resilience beyond what most adults could claim. The reckoning that Thomas Wilson had died trying to initiate was finally approaching. Through the most unlikely of messengers, a 10-year-old boy with dreams of a conductor who refused to be forgotten justice was coming for those who had escaped it for far too long.